Yari Petals, how you doing? It's your girl Lai-Dee Flegman and welcome back to my channel where we are the most cultured on all of YouTube. And degenerate. Very, very degenerate. Over here on YouTube, culture has become the code word for that thing frisky adults and super horny teenagers love to do. The horizontal tango, snoo snoo, kith, bumping uglies, squish squish. I can't think of any more analogies for the S word, and I don't think I'm quite 30 seconds into the video yet, so I'm trying to refrain from heavy language just for now. Need to give, or at least try to give, this video a fighting chance for monetization at some point. Now this video is going to be highly censored, so if you'd like to see the uncensored version along with other exclusive content, head over to the Patreon page, link is in the description. Thanking you all muchly. I think that should be enough stalling for now. Today's video is all about the weird, wonderful and downright terrifying world of kinks and fetishes. Now calm down, stop clutching at the pearl necklaces and put down the pitchforks. There's no need for all that frigid incel commotion. I know the idea of talking about this sort of thing is kind of taboo on YouTube. Don't understand why, we all do it, so why can't we talk about it? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. I've compiled a fairly complete A to Z list of all the different kinks and I'm going to explain each one to you. Kind of like an iceberg list, but more as an alphabetical A to Z list. Nah, we'll work on a name. So go grab a cuppa, get some snacks and make yourself comfy, cause here we go. Before we jump right into the meat and veg of it all, pun most certainly intended, I'm going to be talking about what a kink and are and what the difference is, because there most certainly is a difference. We'll begin with kinks. A kink is an unconventional taste or behaviour. A kink can turn you on, but you don't necessarily need it for fulfillment. For example, BDSM and an nylon kink. Both kinks may turn you on and get you all hot and flustered, but you can still get aroused without these aspects. If is a kink but in turbo mode, you have a strong fixation with a particular inanimate object or non-private parts, and you can't get aroused or have any happy ending without it. An example of this would be a foot or balloon fetish. Now what happens when the kink and or goes too far? Well, that's a paraphilic disorder. The word paraphilia being the psychiatric term for kink. A paraphilic disorder is when a kink or reaches either of these stipulations. It causes psychological distress, injury and or death to anyone, or it involves unwilling persons or people and animals that are unable to give legal consent. This pertains to the usual suspects of and all those other delightful things. Now, with all that out the way, let's jump into the degeneracy, shall we? Starting off strong with algalmetophilia, that's a good word, which is the attraction for human-like statues, dolls, mannequins and the like. Allotocalciphilia is more commonly known as the high heel fetish. This could be in the form of just seeing someone wearing them, or from yourself wearing them as well. A comoclitic is the desire for hairless nether regions, as in you get turned on by a shaved nether region. And before Gen Z scream, no it's not, end of. Moving on. An armpit fetish is not just cultured, it's when an individual gets aroused by the sight, smell and or taste of an armpit. This is, as I've said, a big thing within more on that later. Acnephilia, something I solemnly admit to having, is the kink for popping spots on blackheads. Something I think most girls seem to have these days, and boyfriends around the world groan in displeasure over it. That and from the pain of all the little tiny nips all over the body. Algasmia is the kink of getting on by having squish squish with someone other than your partner, otherwise known as netara or NTR in This is a rather popular genre in Japan, and ominous squish squish is exactly that, where you have squish squish with someone whose identity is shielded. Think glory holes in some forms of Autofellatio is the kink where men want to give themselves happy ending with their own mouths. Acrophilia is when you get excited by heights or by having squish squish in high places. As someone with a fear of heights, this one legit terrifies me. No, thank you. Next one. Actorasti or a sun kink, didn't know that was a natural thing, but never mind, is when you get aroused from sun exposure. Ah, so that's what perineum sunning is all about. I get it. This kink is also often associated with outdoor squish squish activities. Agrophilia is the preference of having squish squish in public places or just outside. I had a friend who's probably had this kink, though I feel the need to also tell people that squish squish in public areas is pretty illegal in most countries. Your own garden though. Aquaphilia, or a kink for water play, is where you have a fascination with the water. This could be anything from just being in the water to activities in the water. Again, heavy petting in public pools is a huge no-no, but that private pool in the back garden is completely fine. This is also related to which is a very dangerous kink that involves breath play underwater. And yeah, I don't think I need to tell you that you shouldn't be doing that at home now. Now these next two are odd. Well, the second one particularly, and again, I'll reiterate the statement from the beginning. Consent, people. If you give it or you receive it, fine, great. If not, pull your trousers back up and walk away. Acrotomophilia is when you are aroused by amputees or people with less limbs than what they should. This one is kind of tricky because, I mean, as long as you've got consent, then everything's awesome. It only really becomes an issue when you want to, create the amputee. So, squish with someone with only one arm is totally fine, but you're crossing the line if you want to cut their arm off just for your own pleasure. Or for their pleasure. Just put the knife down. I mean, that should be a given, but this is 2023, anything is feckin' possible. Leading on from the last one is apotomophilia, which is having an arousal from having your own limbs amputated. I'm pretty sure I don't need to explain it, as I've literally just explained it, but this one is considered a disorder and pretty much illegal in most places. At least I think it is. I'm pretty sure it's frowned upon to hack your own limbs off just to get your rocks off, so yeah, I wouldn't advise this one. But now if you're wanting to roleplay it, now that's completely fine. That's different. Moving on. Acuculophilia is the fetish for a trimmed gentleman. Wink wink nudge nudge. I know for some this is simply a preference, but for others it's a necessity. Age play. Oh boy, this one's going to be a fun one to explain now, isn't it? Age play is a form of role play between adults where either one or both parties act as though they are different ages, like the classic daddy-daughter role play. Again, this also isn't an indicator for anything bad. It's not it's not creepy. People seem perfectly fine with MILFs and sugar daddies. Well, guess what? That's part of age play. There's a reason schoolgirl and cheerleader costumes for adults are so popular. I'm just saying. An alien kink is where you fantasize about having squish with aliens, or yourself wanting to be an alien would fall under this branch too. This is also a popular scenario for a play. More on that in a little bit. It's also similar to the monster girl / boy kink. More on that one later too. Anal play is, well, self-explanatory really. It's where you get aroused at having squish butt up the butt. Need I say more? Amorophilia is the preference of not being able to see during the act. This can be from simply turning off the lights or being blindfolded. Not to be confused with the blindfold kink, that's a separate kink. Agrexophilia is being turned on by other people knowing about your activities. This includes having squish in public places, playing your squish video online, or just talking about your conquests. Now remember, as long as the people viewing it are consenting, then it's totally fine. Andrometaphilia, try saying that 5 times. This kink is going to be a bit controversial given the current social climate, but this kink is the attraction to females who dress and act like men, or trans men. The kink autoandrophilia is being aroused by the idea of becoming a male. Much like autoandrophilia, autogynephilia is when a man gets excited at the thought of being a woman. Now before anyone screams that I'm being disrespectful, chill out, drink some of that cuppa and take a deep breath. You good? Good. I know the current social climate wants us to see these kinds of desires as taboo and that you shouldn't people or things, but it's human nature. We are all degens, just some of us are weirder than others, and as long as it's consenting adults, then it's very normal and natural. Well, for the most part, I mean. A balloon is where you become aroused from balloons. This includes the blowing up, the feel of the balloon itself, or even popping them. It can also include putting them underneath clothing, but that's more of an inflation kink than just a balloon kink. Again, more on that one later. Ballonophilia is the arousal of sharp objects such as needles, pins, razors, knives, and the like. Think Yuri from Doki Doki Literature Club and Gwen from Random Encounters. Again, this one probably teeters over to a disorder, especially if you hurt yourself or others to the extremes. But hey, again, if we're all consenting adults, you do you. Better backing is the act of squish squish without condom, and that's all there is to that one. Well, I will say, here's a few pointers on this one. Firstly, you will get pregnant if you aren't on other forms of contraception, and you are at a huge risk of transmitting an STI. This is why you don't have squish squish with randos. Some of them are just riddled with bugs, though that is a in of itself in the form of bug chasing, and I'm sure I don't need to explain why that one is bad. Bimbification is the kink of being turned into a bimbo with heavy makeup and trashy clothes. I know I probably just offended a few people with that one, I do apologise. Blastalangnia is another branch off of age play, where you are attracted to young women, especially teenagers just above the legal age of consent. Think Leonardo DiCaprio and his love of ladies below the age of 25. As I've already said, and will probably say throughout this video, if they are legally consenting, then that's fine. And yes, that means a 16-year-old can date a 30-year-old. Get over it, I'm very sorry to say. The body painting kink is when you get aroused by the act of painting either your body or someone else's. It's also a fun way of making artwork. Just trust me on that one. Body inflation is the excitement of someone inflating the body or some body parts. Kind of falls under the balloon, just an extreme version. Bondage. The B in BDSM, and a favourite topic of mine. This kink is the arousal of either being tied up or tying someone else up. Bondage has many subcategories, most of which we'll be covering in this video. Body modification is a broader term for the amputee kink, where you get aroused by people who have modified their bodies. This can be as simple as body piercings and tattoos, but can also be the extreme of lopping off someone's arm. Again, please don't do that. Breath play is the arousal of having your breath restricted in some way either before or during squish squish. This is also what the choking kink is. Again, consent and trust are a major thing when it comes to this kink, or any kink for that matter. The begging kink is when either yourself gets aroused by begging or having someone else beg to you for squish squish, or another form of gratification. This is usually a big part of BDSM. Bosom play is the best way I can say this without being struck down. This kink is when ladies get aroused by their partner either worshipping their breasts or causing pain to them. Coulrophilia is the kink for getting aroused by clowns, also known as bozophilia. Clowns terrify me, this terrifies me, we're moving on. Corsetry is the act of wearing corsets, and a corset kink means you become aroused by either yourself wearing the corset or your partner wearing one. And who doesn't love a good corset? Have you seen these? They are just spectacular. Goodbye monetization. Yes, doors on the left. Is the obsession with balls. I almost said when isn't that a but I then remembered I have a mate and his love of collecting penises, so yeah, let's just move on. Capnolangia is the arousal from watching people smoke. It's somewhat rare kink, I can imagine, in this day and age, but trust me, there are a few of us out there. The fact that it's becoming an even bigger taboo is going to create some degens for it too. It's just human nature, I'm afraid. Claustrophilia is the arousal of confinement in small enclosed spaces. As someone who suffers with claustrophobia, this terrifies me. Though I am also a rope bunny and like being restricted, so moving on. A chastity kink is the idea of being blocked from having squish squish, usually in the form of chastity belts and todger cages. This is popular within the BDSM kink. Cross-dressing, in a way at least, is when you are aroused by dressing as the opposite gender. Now again, this one is a sensitive topic and I've been told I'm as sensitive as a badger, so this is going to be interesting. There is a difference between just having a sexual desire to wear your wife's bra compared to feeling like you are the opposite sex. There is nothing wrong with either, but there is a difference between the two. I do believe that there are a lot of confused people out there right now thinking that they're trans because they have this kink. Maybe, but hey, that's just my opinion. Put down the pitchforks. Something quite a few people are very aware of right now is a desire to watch your partner having squish squish with someone else, preferably while you're watching in the corner. The crush is another problematic kink, as this one involves crushing things, or you yourself being crushed. It can be tame, like with food and objects like balloons and toys, to the outright illegal with animals and people. This can also be a form of CBT. Again, consent and legality, two massive musts. This one's going to be a fun one to talk about without getting age restricted. Consensual non-con is the and or kink for, squish squish. Again, this is something you should only be engaging with a partner who you fully trust and consent to, and a safe word is a complete must. Cupping is the interest in placing suction cups on the skin, commonly on the dirty pillows. This is because of the feeling of the suction on the... I was trying to think of an innuendo for but couldn't think of one. This is something I can imagine Sid's Nap being a fan of. Diaper or a nappy if you're British like me, is the arousal of wearing a nappy and or the use of them. This fetish is usually incorporated with infantilism, scat play, water sport, humiliation and dominance play kinks. Again, no affiliation with at all. Dendrophilia is the attraction to trees. That's it. Dacrophilia is the arousal of seeing tears or seeing someone cry. This is another one that sometimes comes hand in hand with the humiliation kink and the dominance kink. Speaking of which, dominance and discipline is the practice of being a dominant, the D in BDSM, and involves training submissives to be obedient, using discipline and other interesting methods. Or DP for the sake of YouTube guidelines, is the act and arousal of having both holes filled with toys or todgers, whichever you prefer. The kink of dorophilia is arousal by touching animal fur, probably something I imagine zoophiles having. Degradation is the practice of humiliation and or quote-unquote for gratification. This usually comes along with BDSM, but not always. This one is a very sensitive topic and quite honestly should only be done by mature people who know what they're doing. This can cause trauma even if that wasn't the intent, and it's neither person's fault for it happening. It's what happens when you experiment with things that you have very little knowledge of. Dracophilia is the kink and where you are attracted to dragons and dragonfolk, another one that is simply a fantasy and roleplay scenario. I know, I'm afraid to say that dragons don't exist, unless it's for Dragon D's nuts! Sorry, I had to. Exhibitionism is the act of having squish or being naked in front of others. I'm sure I don't have to say this, but again, consent, and please make sure it isn't illegal. There are countries out there that it is legal to be naked in front of other people. Edgeplay is another BDSM subcategory and is when you enjoy pushing yourself further than you would usually go. Again, this is something that should only be performed by consenting adults with safe words and trust. Electrophilia is the desire to receive or give electrical shocks on either your own or your partner's body, especially around the nether regions. Obviously nothing that could be dangerous, just like electric shocks, I hope. Enema play is exactly what you think it is. Desire to have an enema. This is sometimes used before having back-end squish to make sure everything is still clean and presentable. I feel like that's not the correct word, but it's the one I'm sticking with. Eproctophilia is a fart fetish. Yeah, not sure what else to say on this one. Maybe I should ask Pyro. Asphyxiation is the official term of breath play, which I've already gone over. It means you get excited by being choked and all. Wrestling is the arousal of wrestling and play fighting with someone. This can then lead to squish and the like. This is quite common among men wanting beefcake women wrestling them into submission. I mean, come on, look at She-Hulk. We know someone was into that. Fireplay is basically that. Any type of activity that involves fire. It could be as simple as having squish by an open fire, very romantic indeed, to the extreme of having flashes of fire across your skin. Ooh. Food play. Not my favourite, but here we go. This is anything pertaining to using food during a squish. This could be from using someone as a plate or a table. Think of the beautiful ladies covered in sushi or fruit, or covering your partner in whipped cream and or chocolate and licking it off. This is a tamer version of Wham. More on that one later. Pharmacopoeia is the excitement and arousal of having insects crawling all over you, or even having them nibbling you. Moving on. A foot is when you find feet attractive and need to see feet to be able to have a happy ending. This is often paired with a high heel kink and the nylon kink. More on them two later as well. Futanari is another popular hentai tag and is the arousal of women with both a todger and a vajayjay. It takes the term lady penis to a whole new level. Feederism is the arousal from feeding yourself or someone else with the intention of gaining weight or increasing body size. It's where the term feeder comes from, and I'm sure it's why mukbangs are so popular. In my opinion, of course. This one makes my vajayjay cringe further up inside me, but figging is when you insert a peeled ginger root into your nether regions, front or back, to generate a burning sensation. What? Oh, the patrons are in for a ride with this video now, aren't they? Is when you shove your hand into the place that, quite frankly, it shouldn't go. Again, you do you, but I don't find the idea of being turned into a puppet very smexy. A furry kink is another branch off of the non-human kink where you are attracted to a cartoon animal and or humanoid animals and want to dress up in animal costumes for the sake of satisfaction. The flogging kink is when you like being flogged with whips, rods, bamboo, cat o' nine tails, and that kind of thing. This is commonly linked with BDSM and impact and punishment play. Face sitting is a type of squish squish where you sit on your partner's face for pleasure. I know death by squish squish is everyone's dream, but it's all fun and games until you're explaining to the cuppa what happened to your partner. Face slapping is when you are turned on by slapping someone's face, or you yourself like being slapped. This again is another form of impact and humiliation play. Golden showers, also known as water sports, are any squish-squish acts that involve urine. That includes being peed on. Don't really know what else to say about this one. Moving on. Gerontophilia is a preference to elderly people. Yes, it also goes the other way too. I remember watching a TV show years ago about an 18-year-old who married a 70-year-old. Not my cup of tea, but they were certainly cute together. Another sensory deprivation kink here with gags, which is something you use to keep someone quiet if they're particularly noisy. Group squish squish is when you enjoy the act with more than one consenting adult. These are known as orgies. I wonder how many bleeps I've had to use so far in this video. Ah, nice. Gerbling, I honestly didn't know this was what it was called. Anyway, this kink is when you have a fascination with inserting small animals into places they really shouldn't be. Like the Eminem song. If you know, you know. A glasses is self-explanatory really. You get turned on by people wearing glasses. Hematolangia is the arousal from blood. This usually involves licking, drinking, sucking, looking at blood through methods I will not talk about. Again, safety is always first, then you can get your rocks off to whatever you want. Hybristophilia is something I honestly think half the female population has, and is the attraction to someone who has committed a crime, like a robbery, murder, and our word. We all know at least one woman obsessed with true crime now. Helplessness kink, also known as the fake king, it is part of the BDSM category and is the enjoyment of feeling terror and being helpless. The fearful mental state awakens a excitement within a person and treats them with a rush of endorphins and releases adrenaline. This is often how we awaken these ideas within us as kids. Hear me out, do not take that out of context. I'll use myself as an example here. I've always known it as the damsel in distress kink, and it awakened when I was a kid watching old movies and cartoons, like cowboy movies when the womenfolk would get kidnapped, or the movie That Darn Cat. Now obviously you don't know what it is then, and nothing comes of it until you hit puberty and hormones are swirling, and then that's how babies are made. Moving on, this kink is also linked to the form of edge play where you roleplay non-con situations and the like. I think I made that YouTube friendly. The imprisonment kink is when you get aroused by being confined in a certain area, like a jail cell or the boot of a car. This is another subgenre of kink within the BDSM kink and often comes paired with bondage and roleplay. An intoxication kink is where you have a preference for narcotics before and or during squish squish. This can be very dangerous and shouldn't really be meddled with simply because of the consent issue. Ice play is a form of sensation play, more on that later, where you use ice cubes to excite your partner in the tamer scenarios, and in the not so tamer scenarios you submerge yourself in ice water. How am I going to explain this one without getting struck by YouTube? Internal cream pies is the kink where you are turned on by having a happy ending inside of a woman's vajayjay. You understand any of that? Good, good, we're moving on. Impact play, like flogging, is the excitement of being hit or hitting someone before and or during squish squish. Impact play is a broader term that flogging and spanking fall under. Interfemoral squish squish is the act of thrusting your gentleman between someone's thighs and not actually penetrating anything. Men with a nylon love doing this act. Hydrophrosia is the of smelling sweaty armpits and groins, and for some degens out there, licking and tasting said sweaty areas. Mmm, delicious. Incest. Oh, damn you. Where's Gart when you need him? Right, this one is going to be an interesting one to try and explain. So the actual act of this is illegal. Well, apart from in the Deep South. In where it's just a drawing and it's tasteful, then you do you. In it's usually mother and son, but siblings are also super popular. But hey, that's just trash taste. Ah, Pyro's wet dream here. Inflatophilia is the inflation kink. This can be as simple as popping balloons once you've inflated them. This falls under the balloon fetish also, and can also include inflatable toys and laying on them while they deflate, all the way up to wearing inflatable bodysuits. Impregnation is a form of animalistic squish where you are aroused by the idea or possibility of either getting pregnant or getting someone else pregnant. Doing this without consent in some places can be seen as a crime, so I do advise against this unless you're with someone who is consenting. The ILFs kink, as I have dubbed them, because there are a few of them, is the acronym for blank I'd like to fornicate. I'm pretty sure that's YouTube friendly, isn't it? Mother, granny and daddy you'd like to squish. These all fall under gerontophilia, which we've talked about before. In fact, 0.15% of the population has this kink. Infantilism. Oh boy, this is going to be an interesting one to try and get past YouTube. This is a type of roleplay and is under the BDSM umbrella, in which one side likes to act like an infant and the other acts in a parental role. This is where the diaper fetish would also come into play. Japanese bondage, also known as kimbaku and shibari, isn't just for pleasure. It's seen as an art form in Japan, and honestly, yeah. There is something about the female form wrapped in rope that is just beautiful. GOI, or jerk-off instructions, is a squish act where someone instructs another on how to reach a happy ending. This, again, is popular within the BDSM community. A weird one now with Koranophilia, which is the arousal from thunder and lightning. I wonder how you get this kind of kink. Knife play is dangerous and probably shouldn't be practiced by idiots, and is the attraction to knives and using them during squish. Again, think of Yuri from Doki Doki. Kittensophilia is the kink derived from excitement by exercise and or movement in general. I wish I had this. Maybe I'd enjoy going to the gym more often. Catrotronophilia. Why do these kinks have to have such ridiculous names? Anyway, this kink is for watching yourself in the mirror, either with your partner or by yourself. Nismalania is the arousal of being tickled or by tickling someone. This is actually quite common because tickling can trigger the same muscles that a happy ending does. So just think about that next time your partner wants to tickle you. Kleptophilia is the arousal from stealing things. I'm sure I don't have to say this, but for the ones eating the crayons at the back, this is illegal. This will probably end up with you being arrested. Say it with me now, fantasy is fine, real life is a crime. Yeah, don't I bloody know it. Lesbophilia is the clinical term for a girl crush, meaning when a female gets a lady boner for another lady. This is not the same as regular lesbianism, as this is strictly for straight women. Ruby Rose comes to mind for this one. I mean, I certainly wouldn't kick her out of bed. Latex or rubber is the preference for either you or your partner wearing latex, rubber, PVC or other similar materials. This also pairs well with the dress-up kink. A lace and satin is part of the sensation play category and is when you have and get aroused by the feeling of lace and or satin. Same with the next kink, which is a leather which is again an excitement for leather. This could include yourself or someone else wearing leather clothing. Lactation. Sorry for the whiplash, hope you're all okay. This kink is weird and very popular within and is the excitement of seeing a woman lactate. Mechanophilia is the attraction to machines, or doing a squish act in or on a certain type of machine, such as cars, washing machines, androids, Iron Man, that kind of thing. Macrogenitalism is the attraction to huge nether regions. I don't think that needs any more explanation. Menophilia is the arousal from blood of a particular type. I know I should explain more, but I really don't want to. It puts a whole new meaning to when the river runs red now, doesn't it? I don't judge, and I've always said you do you, but there are a few things on this list that really give me the ick, and this is kind of one of them. Misophilia is being turned on by smelling or tasting things that have been soiled by certain bodily functions. An extreme version of this is to actually be covered in it, rather than just smelling it. Again, no judging, no judging. I know of the trend on TikTok of vaping or whatever it was called. This would fall under there. In military is when you are aroused by people in the military. This is closely linked to the uniform kink. Macro is an attraction to people or beings that are larger than yourself. Giants, basically, or robust individuals. Measophilia is the attraction or being turned on by pregnant women and the act of childbirth. Yeah, if you saw the birth of my daughter, you'd lose this kink, trust me on that one. Though people turned on by blood would probably have a field day. Let's not discuss that. Moving on. A micro is the complete opposite to a macro and is the attraction to being small or having squish with small partners. Morphophilia is the attraction to certain body shapes and or characteristics that may be different from oneself. This could be as simple as a particular hair colour to size and shape. I know the of certain people is frowned upon right now, but there are people out there that have a preference. Masochism is the arousal of physically or psychologically suffering pain and or humiliation for gratification. It's the M in BDSM and generally goes hand in hand with sadism. Medical play is a medical themed roleplay in which one of you is the patient and the other is the doctor or nurse. This roleplay usually includes dress up with uniforms and even medical equipment can be used. The mummification kink is again another form of BDSM. At this point I might do a video on the world of BDSM. As I was saying, mummification is the arousal of being either partially or completely wrapped up, like a mummy with plastic wrap, bondage tape, duct tape, blankets and the likes. Obviously don't restrict airways or, you'll have to explain things to the police like the other dude. Mixophilia is the arousal by watching others having squish, with their consent of course. Without their consent, and it's a crime. This is what is. Is a thing outside of the UK? Pretty sure it is. Nasophilia is the attraction to noses, and the kink nasolingus is the arousal of licking and or sucking someone's nose. Gonna admit, I didn't know that this was a thing until I started researching this video. The more you know. Narratophilia, or the arousal of dirty stories, or to be really specific, telling dirty stories. We all have that one friend that loves talking about their escapades, or if you're me, you are that friend. Nyctophilia is the preference for being in the dark or nighttime for your squish. This doesn't include just feeling self-conscious about yourself and turning off the lights. This is an actual arousal for the darkness. A nylon is being turned on by the feeling or wearing of stockings or tights. This is often paired with a high heel because let's face it, even the most tomboyish girl like myself will tell you that it's a delicious pairing. Needle play, similar to bellonophilia, is the turn on of being pierced or scratched along the skin with needles. Oculophilia is an arousal to the eyes, either the colour or shape or oculinctus, which is the desire to, oh dear lord, lick eyeballs. Who? Whom? Whomst? Who looks at an eyeball and thinks, I want to lick that? Probably the same person who looked at a cow's udders and thought, I want to pull on that. In heart eyes are a very popular genre, and are used a lot to demonstrate that the person is really enjoying themselves, and would also fall under this term too. Odontophilia is a obsession with teeth. Yeah, this includes licking and trying to bite your partner's teeth. Again, whom? Whom? Why? Olfactophilia is an arousal to bodily smells and odours, especially of the nether regions. Think of panty sniffers and that weirdo at the gym that sniffs the used towels. What, you don't have a Jeffrey at your gym? Interesting. Odaxilania, oh thank heaven, something normal. This is the arousal of being bitten, one of the key components to animalistic squish, and a favourite for horny teenagers who like leaving hickeys all over the place. Another couple I'm going to have to censor the hell out of. Happy ending and control. That should work. So yeah, happy ending, control and denial is the practice of controlling when and if someone is allowed to have their happy ending. This is also part of the BDSM kink. Oromashi is another form of hentai in which you can get excited by a full bladder and needing to go and relieve oneself, if that makes sense. It's another weird one, not gonna lie. Ophidicism is a weird one, that's for sure, though it is part of the zoophile tree, so what do you expect? This particular one is the arousal from reptiles, mainly snakes and females using their tails for reasons. I think that's the best way to describe it, for YouTube at least. The movement of the snake trying to slither back out is what causes the arousal. Another zoophilia kink here with oniphilia, which is the for our feathery friends. A man from Sunderland was charged not too long ago for doing this to a seagull. Of all the birds, why a seagull? They are the sky rats of the coast. Pygmalianism is the attachment to human-like creations, i.e. statues that you yourself has made. I wonder if that includes rubbing one off on your own videos because you think you're just so damn spectacular. But asking for a friend, of course. Who am I kidding? I'm sure there's a few YouTubers who do that anyway. Plushophilia is the attraction to stuffed animals and or soft toys. You may be thinking, Flegman, how? In all honesty, I think you're more likely to ask why, but I'll answer the first one because I'm not qualified to diagnose anyone to answer the second. Basically, you modify your stuffed animal and or plushie with holes and appendages, sort of like how Greg Davis did with BT when he was a teenager. You know the old saying, it's not about the size of the boat, but how it floats? Well, the phallophilia kink will tell you otherwise. This is the kink for extra large todgers and the women that like riding them. Or men. We're inclusive here, we're inclusive. Partialism is the obsession for a specific body part, such as feet, breasticles, hair, hand, legs, left pinky finger. Pubophilia is the pubic hair kink. See, feminists, there are people out there that find your hairiness attractive. Parthenophilia is the preference for the inexperienced in that area. Virgins, basically. Of age and legally consenting virgins, of course. It's also used to describe people that are attracted to older adolescents that are over the age of consent. Psychophilia is the obsession with the cold, and or watching someone being frozen. Now, that's a new one for me. Now, the complete opposite is pyrophilia, or pyrolangia, which is the desire for fire, either by lighting them or watching them, respectively. There is a darker version of this that involves wanting to have squish squish with a burning body, but I think that's a little too dark, for now at least. Oh boy, here we go. Pet play. Pet play is part of the BDSM kink and is the role play where one person, the submissive, dresses and acts like a pet while the owner, the dom, looks after their little pet. Think cat girls and deikins and pony plays. Speaking of which, pony play is the kink and role play where you specifically act and dress like a pony. This can be as simple as using a bit gag until butt plug, to the extreme that I can't discuss on YouTube. Puppy play, much like pony play, is the role play and kink of acting like a puppy. Much like the other two, this role play involves props and is part of the BDSM kink. Vaginophilia is the thrill of being a fugitive on the run. Again, there's nothing wrong with a fantasy and roleplay, but if you become an actual fugitive just for the thrill of it, well, that's on you. Bicetophilia is the excitement from sinful acts. This is usually on a religious basis, i.e. Catholic schoolgirl having squish squish before marriage, but can also be anything a kinkster considers amoral. Pygophilia is the attraction to the buttocks and can involve stroking, licking, and even worshipping the buttocks. Pictophilia is the arousal from watching porn, or specifically watching for the actor or actress or a specific act. Ah, that's the reasons for the simps going after the e-girls. Pee-pee humiliation is a kink involving one party insulting a man's pee-pee, including size, appearance, and performance. This is again something you should only do with people you truly trust and can fully consent to. On the other side of pee-pee humiliation is pee-pee worship, which is exactly that. It's the kink of getting your manhood worshipped. Portricophilia is the preference of having group squish squish. This is the best example between a kink and a group squish squish is a kink, something that you do for fun on the weekends, while the would be only having group squish squish and nothing more. Queophilia is the arousal to the hands. This could be a certain shape or size or parts of the hands, like fingers, fingernails, or even doing particular acts involving hands, like painting fingernails or washing the hands. Is anyone else thinking of that episode of Friends when Joey found his hand twin? The kink known as queening is the act in which a woman sits on her partner's face for a happy ending. Puts a whole new meaning to slay queen. And that's it for Q, we only got 2. Yes, I like to rhyme. What of it? The retiphism kink is an arousal to shoes or other footwear. This isn't just for high heels, but can be for flats, pumps, boots, trainers, and will probably lead to sniffing them. Robotism is the arousal and for robots. This is also different from the mech, as this is more for human-like robots, like the robot Howard made in The Big Bang Theory. Though as to why it had 6 breasts is beyond me. Araminophilia is a bizarre one indeed, and if I'm honest, I don't really believe it's a thing. But it is the squish-squish act of rubbing ramen on your genitals. Horny, high college students will try anything these days, won't they? Rough body play, or RPB for short, is a form of edge play within BDSM, and is when 2 consenting adults want to roughhouse while having squish-squish. This is a good example of BORK, balls out risky kink, and should only be performed by consenting adults that understand what they're doing. Play. Another one I may need to censor is the roleplay of the act with 2 consenting adults. It's more commonly known as consensual non-con, which we spoke about earlier. Rope work, or being a rope bunny, is having an obsession with rope, especially in the context of bondage BDSM. You know, I hadn't realised just how far and wide the BDSM kink actually went until I started doing this list. It was rather surprising. The revving kink is an interesting one. It's the arousal from seeing someone, often a female, rev an engine, especially when they are wearing stockings and high heels. This is also known as car cranking or pedal pumping. We've had happy ending control and denial, well now we have ruined happy endings. This is when you are brought to the brink of a happy ending and then stimulation stops, and you either don't have a happy ending, or you do, but it's not as intense and therefore ruined. Sideodromophilia is the arousal to trains, or riding on trains. I was going to ask how this one works, but as I was saying it, I realised how, and yeah, to keep this video YouTube friendly, I think it's best I don't answer myself. Vibrations, that's all I'm saying. The stigmatophilia is being turned on by piercings and tattoos, especially on the nether regions and the dirty pillows, and yeah, as someone with piercings and tattoos, yeah, I totally get it, especially the nether region piercing. It's a game changer, I can tell you that. This kink is also related to the next kink, scarification, which is body modification to the max, wherein you use sharp objects, or heat in severe cases, to create scars. Another form of edge play, and should only be performed by experienced, consenting adults. Please don't let your edgy boyfriend cut you simply because he wants to. That's not how this works. A slime is the subcategory of the wet messy fetish, and that's all I'm saying on this one. This is a severe ick of mine. I hate slime with a passion. Moving on. A sneezing is when you get turned on by either yourself or from someone else sneezing. This one I find funny because my sneezes are anything but smexy, though I do remember the fact that a sneeze is 1/8 of an from my school days. I touched upon this one back in the P section with picatophilia, the enjoyment of doing something sinful. Stygiophilia is that, but cranked up to 11. Stygiophilia is the arousal of thoughts about hell and damnation. A strap-on kink is probably going to get me age restricted, because everything else was clearly PG-13. Anyway, this is the arousal from wearing, or seeing a woman wearing a strap-on. This is generally female orientated because, well, men don't need one, theirs is already strapped on. This is also what relates to, which is when a woman uses said devices to squish her partner. Sounding makes my vajayjay cringe inwardly again. This is when males put rods of metal or glass into their pee-pee holes, and I don't want to talk about this one anymore. Sapiosexuality is the arousal of intelligence, something that more people are lacking these days. The intelligence, I mean. A spandex is the desire to wear or have your partner wear form-fitting outfits made of spandex. Kinda like the Hentai kink, but this one is broader, so swimsuits, ballet dancers, cyclists, that kind of thing. Scatophilia is as you can imagine it. Think 2 girls and 1 cup, and that Reddit furry that loved eating, chocolate fudge. Yeah, that's all I'm saying on this one. Moving on. And spectrophilia is a fun one, thank God, wherein you have the urge to have squish-squish with ghosts and spirits. Now, sorry to say that ghosts probably aren't real, or at least real enough to have squish-squish with, so this is more of a roleplay scenario than anything else. Somnophilia is the fascination of having squish-squish with a sleeping person, also known as Sleeping Beauty syndrome. Now, before anyone screams, that's this, Not quite. Again, if you're in a trusting relationship and you're both into it, it's fine. You can have a conversation with your partner about your wants and desires and whether you consent to things. That's how a healthy relationship works. And no, before anyone asks, I'm not one of these. Though I have had it happen a couple of times to me, and I can't lie, waking up to a happy ending is a great way to start the day. I'm just saying. Sadism, and the last of the initials in the BDSM acronym, is the for wanting to inflict pain, either physical or psychological, to others, with their consent, obviously. Symphorophilia is another weird one, as it's the arousal from watching car accidents and other traumatic accidents. Is that why there's so many road accident videos on the internet? It would certainly explain things for sure. A spanking kink is a subsection of impact play, and is generally performed using a paddle or your hand, or a flat-soled shoe, and is the act of being aroused by spanking or being spanked. Sensation play is the role play of using different sensations to heighten a happy ending. You've got the safer end of the scale with silk scarves and peacock feathers, all the way to the extreme with the Wattenberg wheel and the violet wand. Sensory deprivation is a kink for having your senses taken away, like using blindfolds to restrict eyesight, earplugs to deafen you, and all those good things. The technophilia kink is the overarching attraction to technology that mechanophilia and robotism also fall under. This includes anything from cars to androids and everything in between. Tentacles, another kink and tag, is the obsession with tentacles, generally depicted by a tentacle monster. It's a branching path from the popular kink monster girls in anime. Next up is one for all the goth chicks out there with taphophilia. This is an obsession with graveyards, cemeteries, and the act of being buried alive. This can be as simple as enjoying squish in the graveyard because you're dark and edgy, to the more extreme of being buried alive and squish in a coffin because, again, you're dark and edgy. Thesauromania is the interest in collecting women's clothing, especially their panties. You know, the classic panty thief and sniffer. Again, this probably falls alongside the kink of body odour. Delightful. As someone with no sense of smell, it's something that both confuses me and intrigues me. The fetish of trichophilia is the obsession with human hair. Most commonly head hair, though it could also house the hairy armpit kink from Anyway, this kink is the arousal from touching, stroking, sniffing, and in some cases, tasting the hair. Tantalolangia, or teasing, is the or desire to be teased, or to tease for gratification. Teratophilia is the attraction to monsters, like monster girls and tentacles. There is a vast array of monster girls and goblins and all that smexy jazz once again within something I can admit to enjoying as well. Trampling is a part of the crushing, but instead of being the one doing the crushing and the stomping, you're the one being trampled upon. This is a very male-dominated with them liking dominatrix to stamp on their testicles. This is another one that makes my vajayjay cringe. Telephonic philia is the arousal from talking about squish over the phone or over messages, also known as phone squish and if you've never before, then you're either too young and shouldn't be here, or just simply don't know what you're missing, especially in this day and age when long-distance relationships are becoming more common. Trialism is the reference to having a menage a trois, or squish with two other people, not just one. This is a major part of polygamy, but isn't mutually exclusive. A uniform kink is finding someone attractive because of their uniform, like police, firemen, cheerleaders, school uniforms, nurses, teachers, wardens, that kind of thing. This also falls under the dress-up and cosplay kink. Europhilia is a kink we have already talked about, but in its hentai form or omashi. Yes, this kink is the excitement of seeing someone relieve themselves within their clothing. There is a purer version of this, where the person just likes wet clothes, especially uniforms, but everything I researched led me back to urination, so take that with a grain of salt. This one. As a girl who lives in the countryside and comes across nettles on a daily basis, this one baffles me. I'm of course talking about the of eructication, which is where you get excited at using nettles to sting your skin. It's a form of sensation play and edge play and should only be done by consenting adults. Voyeurism is the arousal from spying on people being naked or them having squish. This of course needs the consent of all parties. If no consent is given, then you're a peeping Tom and you're likely to get arrested. Vicophilia is not the kink for finding vicars smexy. Sorry for the disappointment. No, vicophilia is the kink of hearing about other squish escapades and getting excited over it. I wonder if that's why Audible is so popular. # not spawn. Vaccinophilia is a strange one that baffles me more and more. It's the kink and or fetish for getting excited by being And I know talking about the V word can get a video taken down in a click of a finger, but it is interesting to see a society that is both obsessed with and terrified of them at the same time trying to function. Vinsalangia is the excitement from bondage. This includes everything related to the bondage category, from seeing and watching it to being tied up yourself. Wax play is a form of temperature play within BDSM that applies wax to stimulate a burning sensation to the skin. Do not use any random candles for this. There are special wax play candles out there, and these have a lower melting point, which makes them safer and reduces the risks of burns. Again, consent is a must with this one. Water bondage is a risky kink. It combines being restrained and breath play with water by either dunking, showering, or other methods of getting them moist. It's a form of edge play and should again only be performed by consenting sane adults. A weapon is the arousal to weapons by either using them within a scene, like in a fugitive roleplay, or actually using them to pleasure yourself with. All I'm going to say on that one is make sure the damn bullets have been removed, or you'll be with the other lot trying to explain to the police what happened. Wet and messy, or the wham, also known as sploshing, is the excitement of using wet and messy food types. It involves foods like cake, cream, chocolate sauce, or slime within your squish squish play. Xylophilia is the arousal to wood. I wonder if the kinksters who are attracted to trees fall under this one too. Though this could also include wooden implements like baseball bats and rolling pins, or simply doing it on the kitchen table. Xenophilia is the excitement or attraction to the unknown, either in the form of someone from another culture and or race, or for aliens and mutants and all them smexy things. Now I know there are going to be people out there again screaming at the screen saying, "Stop races!" And to that I say, chill and drink that cuppa. Yeastiality is a kink where the person is aroused by baked goods with yeast in them. And for the other thing that has yeast in, and I don't want to talk about this one anymore, but I must for consistency. People who must have this kink can also be aroused by the idea of doing it with someone that has a yeast infection. Pretty sure I don't need to explain to you why this is bad, hopefully. Yaoi is a type of made generally for the female members of the human race that centres around gay couples or just general boy love, which is actually what it's called these days. The term yaoi fell out of popularity around the late 2000s, early 2010s. Yiffing, as we all know, is when you yell and sniff at an animatronic fox.
A yiff is probably a yell and a sniff at the same time. So it's like, Freddy! Like that. Like you're sniffing.
Oh no, wait, no. It's a term in the furry community where you have squish squish with other furries in their suits. Zoophilia, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. This is where you are attracted to animals or humanoid animals. This is what a furry would technically fall under. Now let me be clear, this is not the same as long as it stays fantasy, i.e. pictures and or fursuits, and people are all over the age of consent, then honestly, I don't care. It's none of my business what two consenting people get up to behind closed doors. Zelophilia is the kink of getting turned on by the feelings of jealousy. This is a kink common in women that thrive on jealousy. We all know a couple that carries on like they're always fighting, or the woman gets super jealous at a man for just glancing at her female shape. Wanna know why the dude stays with her? Because of the squish squish. And finally, we have Hentai. Had to end on a lighter note. Hentai are the morph suits that busty girls on TikTok love wearing. No shade, I see the thirst, I respect the thirst. Anyway, they're usually of popular superheroes like Spider-Man and many a catsuit, and the kink is feeling aroused from the sensation of the tight material on your skin, and also the smooth sensation it has. It's also heavily linked to the satin and silk fetish. Right, this last part is very sensitive, and I'm not even sure if I should keep it in the YouTube version or keep it for the Patreons, but I do believe these specific ones need to be talked about, even just to stop misinformation ruining people's lives. I will start this section off with this statement. Everything after this point is illegal and considered a crime, and quite frankly, depraved and disgusting. I'm not advocating for any of these, and I'm simply educating people on these topics. So with that said, let's dive in. Xanthophilia is a preference for people with developmental issues or who are mentally impaired. Now, I'm not saying people who have disorders can't be in relationships, that would be stupid, but I'm more thinking of the vulnerable people who may not be able to consent to certain activities. Again, fantasy and all that jazz is fine, but this one will likely get you a stint in Azkaban if you act upon it. Anyway, moving on. Hybristophilia, as mentioned earlier in the video, is the excitement for someone who's done a crime. Now again, if it's roleplay and or fantasy, great, awesome. Or if the person has been reprimanded for said crime and is now a free person, totally fine as well. I'm Northern, I'm pretty sure half the people I've known have had a stint in Azkaban. But the extreme of this is the unwell folk that flick their beans to the likes of Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy. The women that would want to be victims of these said people, or even worse, help them and coerce them into doing other crimes. Again, pretty sure I don't need to go on. Ah yes, I was dreading this topic because YouTube shits its knickers at the sheer mention of it. But considering there are 17-year-olds out there that think anyone older than them talking to them is a I think some education is needed on the topic, don't you think? Because I can tell you now, at 17, you are far, far too old for the sorry to say. They prefer prepubescent children, meaning children under the age of 10, as vile as that sounds. Squish squish with unalive people, just no. Enough said really. Same with this one. I'm sure you can figure out what this one is, and if you can't, you may be a little too young to be watching this video, but for more context, think but with animals. Yeah, moving on. Vor or vorism is the of wanting to eat someone alive or in one chomp for a happy ending. For some reason this is common in the furry community and also within certain which is weird and strange and no. Again, do I really need to explain why this is a big no-no? This is when zoophilia takes a dark turn and crosses the line of consent, because animals cannot give consent. There is no grey line of this, there's no respectful consent or whatever it is that they try to label it as. Animals cannot give consent. End of. Moving on. Is one that is going to be fun to explain. This is the clinical term for committing the R word on someone. Not non-con, actual R word. Now this is disgusting and wrong. Newsflash, water is also wet. And if it ever happens to you, report it to the police. Not to social media or to YouTube or to Twitter, they can't help you. Only the police can help you with this one, I'm afraid. And the last one here, which of course is snuff. No, not the Slipknot song. Classic tune. Go give it a listen, trust me, a better use of your time. Anyway, if you're a veteran on the horror Reddit boards, you're probably aware of this one, but for the less damaged out there, snuff is a type of movie where people and unalive people for excitement. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't need to explain why that one is bad. And that's the entire list. Well, what I'm dubbing the entire list. I'm sure I've probably missed a few things out. Since writing and recording the script, I actually found this book, which I can't read on YouTube because YouTube will literally faint and keel over if I did. I may make a Patreon exclusive about it, I'm not sure yet. But if you want me to talk about this book, then let me know. But yes, this is the end of the episode. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, like, subscribe, join the Patreon, all that jazz, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye!